Very, very nice.
Yay.
Hey, all right. Hi, I'm Scott Fresner.
I'm Mike Fresner.
This video DVD is called Getting Started in T-Shirt Screen Printing, and Mike and I are going to walk you through the entire process step by step. We're going to cover how to use the computer to do your color separations and do your film output. We're going to talk about coding and preparing screens. We're going to show you how to set up a one-color print, a multicolor print, and we're going to cover the industry and how to make money in this business.
Now, since this is a Getting Started DVD, we aren't going to be able to cover all aspects of the printing process in great detail. We will cover the parts that are getting started. What you want to do is you want to flesh out your library to contain things like the How to Print T-Shirts book for fun and profit. This should be in every shop. We also offer a complete line of videotapes and DVDs that cover special effects printing, managing your shop, and marketing.
Now the plan is to sit back, relax, watch this DVD all the way through, get the big picture, and then come back and follow along step by step and learn how to set up and have a profitable garment T-shirt screen printing business. Let's talk about the industry first. The garment screen printing business is about a $30 billion industry. That means it's a huge industry. There's really kind of various levels in this business. So you have the large shops with automatic equipment running thousands of dozens of shirts per day. And then you've got medium-sized shops doing 500s, thousands, 2,000s with mostly manual equipment. Then you have a lot of garage printers, small shops, either home-based or very, very small shops. Let's call them one-person operations. And really the process is the same, so it's kind of funny. You could take a shirt that came out of a small operation, could be a garage operation. That same shirt, could have come out of a large factory, and the print quality could be very similar. The difference being, frankly, the small shop probably made more money. So in the business, you have really the large guy, the middle guy, and the small guy. We're going to cover really how to do the entire process technically of printing a shirt, but the size of your shop really won't matter that much. Now, the industry is made up of trade shows and trade magazines. You've got a lot of places to learn. In this short DVD, we can only cover so much, but you want to learn how to resource, and you've got a variety of trade magazines. One of the main trade magazines is called Impressions Magazine. Impressions is a monthly trade journal, and if you look in the back of a How to Print T-shirt book, if you have a copy of that, there's a free subscription form for Impressions. Another very popular magazine is called Printwear, and these have good technical articles, and the point is they really have lots of ads. They have ads on where to buy the products. Now, all the trade magazines also publish once a year source books, and this is really a resource for where to buy garments. You're going to have customers that are going to walk in and say they want a white shirt with pink sleeves and a red collar, and you aren't sure where to buy these things. And if you go to your source books, your buyer's guides, you'll find where to buy this stuff. And of course, you have other resources like the internet. We're going to talk about that shortly. There's also trade associations. The main trade association is called the Screen Printing and Graphics Imaging Association. And actually, their focus right now is really focusing on the small garment printer as a member, and so they provide toll-free technical support. They provide discounts to members on shipping and things like that, and well worth looking into. And again, if you have a How to Print T-shirt book, there's a membership form in the back of the book. The question I get asked all the time is, can I make money in this business? And the real answer is you can make money if you're a good business person. You've got to keep your focus on this and realize that imprinted sportswear, t-shirts, they're the product, but running the business is sometimes the hard part, and running it so you can make money. And so the real answer though is, yes, you can make a lot of money in this business. We have people that have been to our school that have made millions of dollars printing shirts. We've also seen some people leave the business because it's too messy or maybe it required too many hours. So the business is not really hard, but the running of the business, the actual marketing and selling for many of you may be the hard part. But let's just kind of focus for a second. What if a person wanted to order 200 shirts from you and they wanted a one-color print? Let's say that in today's market you bought the shirts for, let's say on a high side of $2 a shirt, because we're seeing shirts as of the making of this DVD down to less than $1 per garment. But let's say on the high side $2 per garment. Let's say it's 200 prints and it's a one-color print, and you could do 200 prints in on a slow day in maybe 2 hours, and maybe charge the customer $5 or $6 per shirt. So if you're looking at yourself as being a home-based printer or a small printer, and you made, let's say, $3 per shirt times 200 shirts, you're thinking, wow, $600 for a couple of hours worth of work. Well, that's okay, and that's the reality of this business, but the real realities is repeat that. Do it over and over and over. And for some of you in the beginning, it won't quite happen that way, but for others of you, you'll realize you have to just do it again and again and again. There may be days when you make $1 a shirt. There may be days when you make $2 a shirt. There may be some jobs where you make $5 or $6 per garment. Maybe it's a nice men's polo shirt where it's a little more of a perceived value, and you bought the polo for $5 or $6 and sold it for $15 printed. And so there are certain areas where you will make a lot of money. But again, the realities are that the marketing and selling may be the hard part for many of you, and you do want to look at our marketing and selling DVDs because those are excellent. The running of the business may be the hard part, customer service, but you can make money in this business. You know, if you're new to this business, you often wonder, where do you buy the blank garments? And there are literally hundreds of blank shirt suppliers. Again, if you look at Impressions Magazine or Printwear and look at some of the ads, you're going to find probably in your city a company that probably has a warehouse as big as a city block that will sell you one shirt or sell you 10,000 shirts. And so there are so many suppliers right now that will sell you any quantity you want at a wholesale price that buying the shirts is not a big deal.
The internet is really one of your best resources available these days. You can check inventory online of t-shirts to make sure that the shirts you need to print are in stock for your customers. You can order supplies, ink, and if there's something you don't know how to do, some special effects process, you could go online and find out how to do it within just a couple of minutes, I'd bet. One of your best resources that there is screenprinters.net. It's the biggest website in the world for screen printers online, and there's a really nice group of people on there. The message boards are invaluable for information. Before posting your question, you might want to try searching the message boards to see if somebody has already asked your question. You might get a variety of answers from real-world situations and real-world people that could give a better answer than maybe your supplier could give you, where it's just a salesman behind a desk that might not have done what you're asking, and he's just making up answers based off of what he's reading from the instructions of some product that's on sale he has to push that day. If you're not online yet, you really should be. It's a great tool for communicating with your customers. They can email you images so that you can quote jobs. You can email them back. I think it's really increased the speed that business happens at. You can go to screenprinters.net, like I mentioned, and look at the technical articles. There's articles that will describe all aspects of this industry on there. There's classified ads that list hundreds of used pieces of equipment.
There's also industry forums for specific manufacturers of products and equipment where you could go ask the users who have that particular equipment or product and get real-world answers to your questions. Let's talk about your equipment concerns. Now, it really doesn't matter if you're going to be a small garage shop or a large automatic printer. You're still going to need some pieces of equipment that are similar throughout the size shops. You're going to need a screen print press. This is a 6-color press with 4 platens. You're really not going to want fewer than 6 colors on a manual press, and probably not fewer than 8 to 10 on an automatic press. Some of the other things that you're going to need is you're going to need a flash cure unit. This is used to temporarily cure the shirts while you're applying other colors, or in a small shop, this might be your dryer. For larger shops, you're going to use a dryer. The dryer it heats the ink up to 300 degrees and gives it a full cure and allows the ink to stay on the shirt. Now, this is the first piece of equipment that most people outgrow. While it's easy to add a couple more presses to a dryer, it's not as easy to add a couple more dryers. So you want to get a dryer with the widest belt that you can in the beginning, because if you can put shirts side by side, you'll double the output of your dryer and you won't be standing there waiting for that shirt to go in each time. You're also going to need a supply of screens, squeegees, a spotting gun, some of the smaller things. Squeegees are very important. Now, you could either get the wood ones or metal ones. There's a variety out there. Same with frames. You can get wood frames, metal frames. If you're just starting out, you just need some on hand. What type they are aren't as important. You're also going to need an exposure unit. Now, an exposure unit is the device that we use to put the image into the screen so that the ink will pass through only in the areas we want it. This is a larger exposure unit and might be more than your budget allows for. You can also use a simple to build sunlight exposure unit, which even if you have a large unit, you should keep one of these on hand for emergency purposes. Now, once you've exposed your screen, you're going to need a place to wash it out. This is typically going to be a shop sink, something industrial. If it's backlit, that's nice and can be convenient. You're also going to need some kind of pressure washer to help remove the images from the screens when you're done so that you can use the screens again on your next job. You're also going to need a good supply of chemicals and solvents, but you don't want to just use any of them. I recommend looking through your How to Print T-Shirts book or looking online and finding out what most of the people in the real world use. A lot of the solvents these days are citrus or soy based and are a lot safer than the stuff we used to use, but you still need to make sure and keep a MSDS book on hand. For every chemical that you get, you should get an MSDS sheet. Put it in a big book and make sure all your employees know where it is. If you're a new shop, you'll get inspected at some point and you really need to be ready for when that happens. And when you start out, you could be a small garage printer and print in a bedroom of your house, or maybe a little bigger in your garage, or you could get a very large warehouse and have several automatic presses. For a small shop, you could get away with a 6-color press with a flash unit. This would be about the minimum that you would need, or you could have a large warehouse with 7 or 8 automatic presses. There's really room everywhere in this industry for all levels of printers. You have people that are only looking for a dozen shirts, and you have large corporations looking for hundreds of thousands of shirts. There really is room for all levels of printing. Now, you might wonder whether you should maybe build your equipment, buy used equipment, or get new equipment. The How to Print T-Shirts for Fun and Profit book does have plans for building your own wooden press. You also might want to look online at screenprinters.net and look in the classifieds there. There's a large number of used equipment. Now, it's bought sight unseen, so you might not always know what you're getting. There are equipment remanufacturers out there that take this used equipment, rebuild it, and then offer a warranty with it. Or you could just buy brand new equipment that you're going to get a warranty with, and the manufacturer will stand behind.
Let me talk to you for a second about how the process works and give you the big picture right now. It's oftentimes easier to see kind of where you're going in a real quick trip, and then we can come back and talk about it step by step. Again, as I mentioned earlier, this process is not difficult if you keep your focus. First of all, you need a piece of artwork, and that means the customer is going to hopefully supply you with some art. We're going to talk in a moment about how to use the computer to do your color separations and do your art, but somehow, some way, you have to get a piece of artwork and get that piece of artwork on either a clear film or on a piece of paper that we can use to expose a screen. So we need a piece of art, and again, we're going to cover this later on in this DVD. We need the art. We then need a screen frame, and we're going to coat the screen frame with a light-sensitive liquid called a photo emulsion. We're going to walk you through that step by step. So we're going to coat the screen. We're then going to take the piece of artwork and lay it on the dried coated screen and expose it to ultraviolet light. It could be outdoor sunlight, it could be a fluorescent unit, it could be an exposing unit, but we're going to expose the screen, and where the light hits the emulsion is hardened. Where the light doesn't hit it, it's water soluble. We're then going to take our screen to the sink. We're going to wash the screen out, and wherever the light didn't hit the emulsion, because of the film and the image, it washes away. And now we have a stencil. And as we showed when we started this DVD, we then make a print. We bring the screen down on the shirt, make a print, take the shirt off, put it to the dryer. And the process is that simple. So we take artwork, make a screen, develop the screen, put it on the press, put ink in the screen, make the print, go through the dryer, and we repeat that, and make money in this business. Now, a multicolor print is done very similar, except we have more than one screen for the various colors. That's the process in a nutshell. Now, before I talk to you about how to use CorelDRAW and do color separations and basic design building in CorelDRAW, let me talk to you about some terminology first. You'll be talking to screeners and they'll say, well, I used a 230, which would be the mesh count, on a 25 Newton screens. That's how tight the screens were. And I did an index color separation, which is little tiny square pixels. And you're lost. You're going, what are these guys talking about? Let's cover some terminology quickly. Your basic jobs are going to be what's called spot color. Spot color is where you print, in this case, gold and white, and you don't print any other colors besides just these two colors. And so most of your bread and butter printing is going to be called spot color. And again, spot color is, in this case, it's kind of a cream color, and there's a blue on this, and it's just very specific colors of ink. Now, it's kind of easy to go, I don't want to do that kind of stuff, but you know what? This is going to be your bread and butter printing. When somebody comes in and says, I want a one-color print on a shirt, and if you say, well, Jay, I can do the same thing in 6 colors, but it's going to mean 6 screens, it's going to be a lot more money, but it'll look really cool, you're going to find the customers going, no, I'm going to move on and go elsewhere, because the customer came in and said they wanted a one-color print. And I have an attitude, by the way, you ought to give them what they want, and as long as you gave them what they want, they were happy with the outcome, and you made money, that's really about all you should care about, frankly. And so your bread and butter is going to be spot color. Now, as time goes on, customers are going to come in and say they want photorealistic images on light shirts. Photorealistic images are typically called process color. This is actually 4 colors of ink: cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, commonly called CMYK. And you're going to learn that process color is a little harder to print. It's all tiny dots called halftone dots, requires a little bit better press setup, burning a better screen, and process color, by the way, is not the focus of this DVD. This DVD is going to pretty much stick with basic spot color to get you going, and then as you get better, you can do process color. By the way, process color is not hard, because once you can make 1 screen, you can make 4 screens. Once you can print 1 print, you can print 4 prints, but it's doing the color separations that are difficult. This job actually came and was color separated by our program called Fast Films. Now, as time goes on and you want to do work on dark shirts are typically called simulated process color. Looks like CMYK, smells like CMYK, but it's not CMYK. This is actually a 6-color print. And this is harder, and this, again, is not the scope of this DVD, but I just want to show it to you so when somebody says I did a great simulated process color job, you know it's probably a black shirt, it was probably a photorealistic print, and it was all halftone dots. Another type of separation that's commonly used is called index color. Indexing is little tiny square dots. And again, indexing is not going to be covered in this session, but I want to give you the terms. We're going to pretty much be covering how to do basic spot color designs with color gradations, with halftone dots in this DVD. Okay, the first step in the process, other than getting a customer, which as you'll discover is sometimes the hardest part of the process, and sometimes when you have fussy customers, you'll wish you didn't have those customers, but the first step is get a customer. The customer then has expectations of what you can do. He thinks it's just going to give you a piece of junky art and you're going to perform miracles with it. He's going to give you a napkin with a sketch on it. He's going to give you his child's drawing from school. He's going to give you a Word file that has a graphic in it. He's going to give you all kinds of things you can't work with, but he's going to figure you can work with it because you're a pro. And we're going to talk right now about how to take customer supplied art, we'll use that pretty loosely, and convert it into something that we can burn a screen from. And if you recall from the section we just covered on the actual process, we need somehow to get the artwork from customer's mind, our customer's napkin sketch, onto either a piece of clear film or onto a piece of paper that's more translucent that we can use to expose the screen from. That's kind of where we're heading right now, is how to go from their idea to this. And this is going to be the hardest part of the process, and for many of you it's going to require looking at our Corel videos, looking at our Photoshop videos. You know, those are a lot longer. Our Corel videos are 5 hours in length, and so in this short DVD we just haven't got time to cover everything step by step. The How to Print T-shirt book also has a great section on preparing the artwork. But the customer's going to walk in and give you something like this. They're going to say, this is the artwork, and they're going to figure that you're just going to take this and perform miracles with this and put it on a shirt, but they really want it to have a nice hard edge and be not quite as sloppy. Can't you clean it up a little bit? And of course it requires time to do it. There's no magic. There's no way to scan this and then push a button in computer graphics that says clean this thing up and make it work on a shirt. It may require you taking time to lay a piece of paper over the artwork, piece of vellum paper, and actually tracing it and recreating it. There'll be many times you recreate the artwork where the customer thinks, wow, you were a magician, and you go, yeah, I spent 3 hours all last night working on your artwork just for your few shirts. The problem is going to be then, how do you charge for that? Because if you spent 2 or 3 hours cleaning up the customer's art for just 6 shirts, you just aren't going to make any money in this business. You have to then be very hard with the customer and say you need to go to an outside artist and pay them to recreate the artwork, or pay me to recreate the artwork. But in this industry, things change when the customer is now talking about 500 shirts, 1,000 shirts, lots of shirts, repeat jobs over and over and over. You'll find yourself spending a lot of hours touching up customers' artwork, making it look good so the prints look good, so they'll come back and reorder shirts from you. So we're going to talk right now about how to take customers' artwork and get it prepared properly. Let's talk about computer graphics. Now we have the first issue of should you go Mac or PC? That's kind of always the thing. What hardware should I buy? If you're an artist and you've taken art classes, you've been to art school, you have artist friends, you probably want to go with a Mac, because typically if you've used a platform, you like that platform. That's why Mac guys say PCs don't work, PC guys say Macs don't work. It's because they've only been exposed to one platform. I say keep with the platform you came with. You know, if you like Mac, stick with Mac. And so we don't care whether you're on a Mac or a PC. If you're a business person who's used spreadsheets, word processing, accounting programs, you probably will like a PC a lot better because you're comfortable with a PC and you're used to swapping out cards and building it up, and you're used to configuring it, and you understand Windows, and you'll be happy with that. The realities are all of the graphic programs we're going to talk about quickly all work the same on both platforms. CorelDRAW, Adobe Illustrator, Adobe Photoshop all work the same on both platforms. They're identical. The buttons are the same. The menus are the same. And the customer really doesn't care which platform you use. So we don't care what you're going to use, but we do need to get computer graphics software. By the way, when you're buying your computer, you want to get the fastest computer you can get, and you want to get the most RAM you can get. RAM is very inexpensive right now. What would cost a day $50 in RAM might have cost $100,000 10 years ago for RAM. RAM is the temporary memory that the computer uses to kind of store things, hold things, and work in. And the more RAM you can get, the better off you are. So get a fast computer, lots of RAM. And in today's market, you can get all computers have a CD burner on them for backing up data. Some of your file sizes might get kind of big. Now, we need to talk about graphics programs. You really have 3 basic programs in this industry. You've got 2 of them that are called vector programs. Vector programs like a cartoon kind of a look. They like a hard-edged graphic. It's all math to the computer. It knows from the math from point A to point B to point C. It knows the curve. It knows the edge. It knows how thick the line is. And so vector programs are typically CorelDRAW and Adobe Illustrator. If you're a Mac user, you probably will go with Adobe Illustrator because that's the program of choice on the Mac side. If you're a PC user, you're probably going to go with CorelDRAW. That seems to be the program of choice on the PC side. They both do the same thing. They both allow you to scan an image in, bring it up, convert the image from little pixels that the scanner sees into vectors, into the actual math of the image, bring it into the program, add color to it, add gradations, add type, and output films or output what's called color separations. And so vector programs are something you need. They're your bread and butter programs. Every day you're going to be using a vector program. You're going to bring an image up, add type, fill it with color, output films. Bring up an image, add type, output films. And so you want to look at either Corel or Adobe Illustrator. Now, this is a one color print, and if you're doing a multicolor design, you're going to need two pieces of film, or paper, or vellum, or acetate, whatever it takes to burn a screen, one for each color. Now, when you're working in computer graphic programs, you're looking at the monitor and the image is in color, and you're thinking, well, I need color output. No, you're a screen printer now, and you need to burn a screen from a black and white image, and then you're going to put the right color of ink in the screen at the press. You're going to take this and burn a screen, take this and burn a screen, you're going to go to the press, line these up, which we're going to show you later, and put the correct color of ink. In this case, it might be brown ink for the squeegee handle, it might be black ink for the outline, called the key line oftentimes, and that's what we need. Is we need what's called color separations. All of these programs will do either simple one color or multicolor color separations. Now, I mentioned you need three programs. The third program is a program called Adobe Photoshop. Photoshop is a pixel-based program that is going to be kind of on your wish list if you're starting off. At the beginning, you do need Corel or Illustrator. You need one or the other, and don't let anybody talk you into anything else other than one of those two programs. Don't let people talk you into buying a little $50 consumer program, because typically those programs will create the image, but they will not do separations, and we have to keep our focus. We need a way to output the image either as a one color or as a multicolor design and have it separated if it's multicolor. But Photoshop is more high-end. Photoshop likes photorealistic images. So if your design is a photograph with lots of colors and shading and gradations, Photoshop is the program of choice. Obviously, this DVD does not cover how to use Photoshop. I'm going to show it to you very briefly. We have a complete 5-hour training DVD on Photoshop that teaches you how to use the program in depth. I'm just trying to empower you to know what you need to buy. You need to buy either Corel or Illustrator, and you need to buy Photoshop. Now, we need to talk about other hardware requirements, other things you might need. You need a scanner. Scanners are so cheap right now. I just bought a scanner last week for $60. I mean, they're very inexpensive right now. You want a scanner with the highest optical resolution you can get, and typically that's going to be 600 to 1200 dots per inch DPI. A scanner will often call it SPI, samples per inch, or PPI, pixels per inch, but you want to get a high number. And you want to get a scanner that has what's called a high dynamic range. That means it's going to see the image a little better. It's going to see very subtle areas better. Some scanners see the image like that, and I'm blind without my glasses. They see it as like white, gray, and black. And you want a scanner that's going to have good eyesight. It's going to see the image nice and sharp. It's going to see all the subtle variations in the image. But again, you could get a good scanner for, $100, $200, not a big deal. We need to have a way to output the film. So we talked over at the press about how the process works. We have to have some way to burn a screen, and we're going to burn a screen either from a clear film that has the image in black, because the black image blocks the light, if you recall. We can also output, of course, off of vellum paper. This again we'll burn a screen. This is very transparent, translucent actually, and light will go through this, and the toner blocks the light from hitting the screen when you're exposing your screen. Both will burn a good screen, but the problem is that some output devices don't have enough black image on the film or the vellum to burn a great screen, so you're always struggling burning screens. Let's talk for a second about what we're going to use to output films. We could use a standard laser printer. You could just take the image out of your computer graphic programs, print it out, and out of the printer comes the vellum paper, often called acetate because you can buy more of a plastic as opposed to a paper. The problem with a laser printer is it doesn't lay enough toner down sometimes, and if you're doing a multicolor design, the fusing rollers for the laser, which get hot, shrink the film, and things don't line up. If you have a multicolor print, you need two images, and they've got to line up. And so here we have one for one color, one for the other, but they've got to line up. And if your laser printer has shrunk this slightly, you go to press and you screw around all day long trying to get the thing to line up and have the image print in the right location. It doesn't happen. Now, people have used laser printers for years, and so don't get me wrong, you can use a laser printer, but technology has changed, and we're now getting away from using a laser printer. The hot deal right now is using an inkjet printer. This is off of the Epson 3000, which is the printer of choice today. Now, The problem with inkjet printers is inkjet printers typically don't know how to do enough ink deposit just out of the box. If you just put clear film on an inkjet printer, it really wants to print in color. It's really a color printer, and you say print the black only, and the black is fairly weak because it doesn't print real heavy black on colored images. It lets the other colors make the black also. And so inkjets don't lay enough ink down. You do need a product that goes either with your laser or your inkjet called PostScript. PostScript is a third-party program written by Adobe that lets you do what's called halftone dots. Halftone dots are small, tiny dots. If you want to do any kind of shading or gradations where you go from a dark color to a lighter color, well, in screen printing, you have to burn a screen somehow, and you can burn little tiny dots. If you took a look with a magnifier at the cover of your daily newspaper and looked at a photograph, you see it's made up of small, tiny dots. Those are called halftone dots. Well, PostScript is a language that tells typically a laser printer or an inkjet printer to do halftone dots. Not all PostScript does that, by the way. On an inkjet printer, PostScript also manages colors. So a lot of your inkjet printers have PostScript that does not do halftone dots. So a laser will be okay, but the laser should have PostScript built into it. But you'll have the problem of the shrinkage of the image and not dark enough toner deposit to burn a great screen. Inkjets are better, but you have to have a third-party software called a RIP, which interprets PostScript and tells the inkjet it's seeing PostScript. We have a product called FastRip, and FastRip with the Epson 3000 right now is becoming the industry standard for outputting film, because the beauty is with an inkjet printer there's no heat and there's no shrinkage, and your films line up perfectly so you get perfect registration. So you've got to look at output devices. Keep in mind, if you go to your supplier, he may still say, oh, you need to buy an inkjet, you need to buy a laser printer. Keeping in mind your supplier sometimes is about 3 or 4 years behind the industry, and the hot thing today is inkjet output with a RIP that makes it work correctly, and FastRip is the inkjet output software device of choice. Now, if you're on a budget, there always is Plan B. And by the way, I want you to be aware that we'll never talk down to you. We started out years ago in our garage. We understand what it's like if you're a small printer to start off with limited funds and great idea, great hope for the future, and really want to be a business person and make a lot of money. And it may take a little bit longer than you think. But in the beginning, you only have so much funds, and you're going to have to spend the money here and there and buy a printer and buy a flash unit, and you're going to find that there's just not enough money. And so maybe an oversized laser printer isn't in the cards. Maybe an Epson 3000 isn't in the cards for you. Plan B would be to take a regular desktop copier and make a copy onto overhead transparency material. Now, the good news, bad news is that it works, but the bad news is that the toner deposit's not very dark. And even though it looks dark as we look at it, we want it to be dark as we're looking through it. So if I hold it up to the light and look through it, we're going to see it's pretty weak. It will burn a fair screen. But you could double it up, do 2 copies, and tape them together and burn a screen from it. So that's Plan B, would be just use your desktop copier to do output. Plan C would be just to draw. You could draw the image on clear acetate and burn a screen from that. Plan D would be take your design to Kinko's or any of your quick copy centers and take them the artwork and have them copy onto overhead transparency material, which is used for sales presentations. So there's lots of ways you can do it. The bottom line is you want to evolve into getting your inkjet with FastRip, but for today, if you're on a limited budget and you want to get designs done and maybe try the process, take it to Kinko's or just come off of your regular copier. Okay, let's take a second. I'm going to talk to you about CorelDRAW, and we're going to do a very simple design rapidly. And again, this is not a Corel tutorial as much as I'm trying to empower you as to how to use Corel, to realize it's a program you want to get, to see how simple the process can be. A lot of times the customer does walk in there with just an idea. He says, give me a cactus and put the word Arizona below it, and you're going, well, I need to hire an outside artist. There is third-party artwork called ClipArt, and ClipArt is ready to go, commonly called copyright-free artwork, meaning that it's images you can use, it's images you can put into designs. You could bring up the barbells and say this is going to be Phoenix, weightlifting team. And you may think it's not a very good piece of art. You may think that it's junky art. But in this industry, you have to sometimes put your ego away, put your artistic skills away. And if the customer's eyes light up when you do the design and they go, wow, killer, you have to kind of know you hit a home run, whether you like it or not, because they're going to love it on a shirt. They're going to be real happy to get a printed shirt. So you have to kind of keep your focus and not go too far ahead. But this is from our friends at Smart Designs, and they have multiple volumes of stock artwork, and they have lots of pre-done templates. Templates are where it's already got banners in place and graphics in place, and all you do is come in and add the soccer ball, add the school name, add the different colors you want, and output separations, and life is good. And so when you're using programs like CorelDRAW or Illustrator, there's lots of art help there for you. Let's go to the computer monitor and look at CorelDRAW right now. This again is CorelDRAW version 11.0. Now you could be on a newer version of Corel or an older version. What I'm going to show you is the same way. These programs all work very similar. On the left of the screen we have what's called the toolbar, various tools. Corel can be overwhelming. If I click on the pull down menus and drop them down, there are just lots of selections. Keep your focus. You're going to use CorelDRAW to do some basic text. If I click on the text tool, bring the cursor up over the page and type in the word t-shirts, I can hold the mouse button down and click and drag and make it bigger. And I misspelled it obviously, but I can click just like in word processing and correct it. Let's go to the top pull down property bar. We can now scroll down through the various typefaces that are in the computer. We can pick a typeface we like. I want you to think about design. Keep away from things that are too thin. It's hard to burn screens. Hard to read on a shirt. Think readable always when you're designing for t-shirts. But here you can see you can pick from hundreds of typefaces, and you want to try and think bold. You're going to walk into stores and start looking at shirts now and seeing what they look like, and you want to think bold. So here we have a word, t-shirts. Now we could right now take this one color image, we could say print, and out of our printer will come a one color image we can go and burn a screen from, and go to press, put any color of ink. By the way, I have this image in black, but it doesn't really matter because we could put red ink at the press, and life is good, and we've done a one color print. Now let me take this and enhance it a little more. We're going to go back to the screen. On the right of the monitor screen in CorelDRAW, we have what's called the color palettes. And we want to be in what's called the Pantone Matching System Spot Color Palette. Depending on what version of Corel you're in, it's very important because Corel is set up out of the box to be what's called the CMYK palette, meaning if you fill the design with red, it won't really be red. It'll want to print out yellow and magenta to make the red. You want to be in the Pantone Matching System palette, very important. We can click and drag and drop a color. Now in computer graphics, everything is made up of a fill with an outline. Right now we have a red fill and a red outline. Back on the color palette, the right mouse button in Corel changes the outline. I just gave this a very, very thin hairline black outline. Hard to see till I zoom in. Now you may think, well, that's okay, but that's too thin for screen printing. We need heavy, thicker outlines for screen printing. I'm going to go over to the left-hand toolbar and click on the outline pen tool and give it a thicker outline. Now that doesn't look correct, because in computer graphics, the outline actually goes from the center. I just gave this thing a 12-point outline, and it made the outline fatter from the center, meaning it went 6 points into our design and 6 points away from our design. If I go back to the outline pen tool, go to the very first little guy in called the outline pen dialog, and I click on the checkbox that says behind fill, I've now put the outline behind the fill. Now we have a very respectable two-color image. Now, if we go to the File pull-down menu, come down to Print, and come over to Separations, if we look down below, we have our two colors, and on the right of the screen, it shows the actual separations. If I check Print Separations, on the right of the screen, it shows the word T-shirts. There's the fill, there's the outline, there's our two separations right there. And if we now say print, these print out, and we can tell Corel to put registration targets in the corners, so when we go to press, we can line things up, and we just did a very simple two-color separation. Okay, we did our simple two-color design, and that wasn't too hard, but what happens when they do bring you that sketch, that idea, and you have to have either someone draw it or you trace it, and you end up with a piece of what we would call line art. This is typically called black and white art. It used to be called camera-ready art, but today we call it scanner-ready art. We've got to scan it in. Now, a lot of times it's going to be their business card, and that's the problem. They've got this little tiny logo on the business card, and we got to blow this thing up and make it huge on a shirt, and they wonder why the image is a little jagged. It's because the design was sharp, small, and then we blew it up. But we're going to take and scan this image in. We're going to put this in the scanner. And we're going to go back to the computer. I'm in Adobe Photoshop right now for scanning. We're going to show you Photoshop in just a second, but I'm going to use Photoshop for scanning right now. You could scan directly into CorelDRAW if you want to. I'm going to go to File, Import, and I'm going to load my scanner driver. Now a scanner will typically scan the page for first to show you where the image is. It's doing a very quick what's called a preview scan. So it shows you the image, and it really wants you to tell it what you want to scan. I want to scan just the image, not the entire page, obviously. Now, the important thing to remember on using any kind of we'll call them inexpensive scanners. I hate to say consumer, but really they are consumer. When you pay $60 for a scanner, you're getting kind of a toy at times, and they're pretty well set for low resolution. We're t-shirt printers. We need higher resolution. If we take an image that's that big and we blow it up, when the scanner sees the image, it's going to make the entire image consist of small pixels. And if we have a low resolution, meaning 72 dots per inch, which is typically what a web graphic is, or what scanners are set to default, if we scan it low res at the same size, then we enlarge the image, let's say twice that size. That makes the resolution drop in half, if that makes sense, and we have a pretty jagged edge to our image. We want to typically scan at much higher resolution, like a piece of black and white line art like this. I might scan at 600 dpi, 800 dpi, 1000 dpi, making those pixels real small, and I would scan at that resolution at the final size I want on the shirt. And you'll see why I want to do that in a second. Let's go back to our scanner though. So we have our resolution set correctly. We're going to say accept, and we're going to have it scan the image. Now there's the scanned image, and we can save this file and bring this file into CorelDRAW. I'm going to save this file as a bitmap file, meaning it's going to be just black and white with no color, and I'm going to bring this file into CorelDRAW. Okay, we scanned the image, we scanned it at high resolution, we saved it, we scanned it into Photoshop, we saved it, and the problem is an image like this is all pixels, all little bitmaps, little tiny pixels and dots, and as I said earlier, CorelDRAW or Adobe Illustrator, both programs are vector-based programs. You can't do much with an image when you bring it into CorelDRAW if it's little pixels. That's why they do make another program that are add-on programs to your vector programs called tracing programs. CorelDRAW comes with a program called CorelTrace. CorelTrace is free with CorelDRAW. It comes as a utility program with CorelDRAW. Adobe Illustrator has an optional program called Adobe Streamline, and Streamline is an extra program that does cost, but Streamline is the tracing program of choice on the Mac side. CorelTrace is the tracing program of choice on the PC side. A tracing program takes those little pixels, those little bitmaps, and converts it to what's called vectors. Meaning if I want to take our little squeegee guy that we just scanned, and if I want to add any color to him, I can't do anything to him right now because he's black and white. He's going to stay black and white. If I take him into a tracing program and convert him into vectors, I can now fill in with color and color separating. Let's go back to the monitor right now. I'm in a program called CorelTrace. This is the original piece of art that we scanned just a second ago. I brought it up into CorelTrace. Now, if I tell CorelTrace to give me a very accurate trace, making it 100%, and if I say do trace, the right screen shows the trace happening. And it's finished tracing. Now, I can actually click on this object, this screen. I can go to the Edit pull-down menu and say Copy. And I can go to CorelDRAW and open up CorelDRAW. And I can right mouse click and paste the image in. And there is now my squeegee guy in CorelDRAW. And you notice that there's now no background around him. As a scan, he had a solid white background. There's no background around him now. I can click and drag and make him bigger. I can put him in lower. I can click on the word t-shirts. I can right mouse click and say change the order and bring the t-shirts to the front. Put the squeegee guy behind it. I can Control Z, which is an undo. And I now have basically a two-color design. Black outline, red fill for the word t-shirts, and squeegee guy that's in black and white. I can now go to the color palette and I can start filling squeegee guy with color. I can click and drag and drop a color, click and drag and drop a color, because now that he's vectors, I can fill in with color. I can pick up a brown for the squeegee handle, drop it there. I can select just the handle by itself, pick up what's called the interactive fill tool from the toolbar, bring it up over the handle, click and drag and give it a slight gradation, and life is good. Now I'm going to finish filling him with color, and then we'll output color separations for our simple design, and we'll put it on screens, go to press, set it up, and print it. Okay, I filled our squeegee guy with color. I used some gradations using what's called the interactive fill tool, which is a Corel tool where you just click and drag and give it a gradation or shading. And keep in mind though that on the computer monitor it may show as a shading, but we have to print it out as halftone dots. And again, your printer must be able to print halftone dots. Let's go back to the monitor right now. We're going to go to the File pull-down menu, come down to Print. We're going to tell it we're going to print to the Epson 3000 printer. We're going to click on the Separations tab. We're going to check on separations. We have to tell it the line count and the angle for the halftone dots. And by the way, let's go back to the General tab. Let's go to the Properties tab. Let's go to the Advanced button. Let's tell it we're going to print to 13 by 18 film. Now it looks correct on the right of the screen. Now we're going to go back to the Separations tab, check Separations, click on the Advanced button. If we can't get to the Advanced button, this is very important. It means you do not have PostScript. We get more phone calls from people that say, I've got a printer and I can't get to the Advanced button, and the answer is very simple. You do not have PostScript in your printer, and Corel says no PostScript, no halftone dots. Let's make this simple design a 35-line halftone. Let's make the angle of the dots, because the dots all have a certain angle to them, 25 degrees. So we'll make a 35 line, 25 degrees, 35 line, 25 degrees for all four colors. And again, this is covered in much more detail on our Corel training videos. And so now we have it set to separate. We've told it to put registration targets in the corner, and now we're going to say print, and the job gets sent to our Epson 3000. Okay, we've output our films on the Epson 3000 using FastRip, and we now have 4 films that have halftone dots, pretty good sized dots. Remember I told it was 35 dots per inch, commonly called the frequency of dots, nothing to do with DPI, that's dots per inch having to do with resolution, but it's commonly called the LPI, really lines per inch, our frequency. So we have the film for the red, the film for the brown, and there's registration targets in the corners of the film, so we can use these to line the job up at the press. I've got the actual film for the black, commonly called the key line or the outline color. This could just be a one-color print, and I've got the film for the yellow. And so we're ready to go, ready to burn these on screens and set this job up at press and do a multicolor print. Let's go back and talk about Photoshop for a second though. Come back to the monitor. We're going to look at a program called Photoshop. You know, we scanned into Photoshop a second ago. Now this program does not cover Photoshop. I'm just here to show you what Photoshop is all about and kind of tease you with Photoshop. This design was built in Photoshop, and as you can see, Photoshop likes photorealistic images. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you how this thing was built real quick in Photoshop. This design started off as a scan of a photograph of a motorcycle. And wherever you see checkered little marks here, this means that there's no background, meaning that this motorcycle is transparent, meaning I can move him around. You get photographs and you got to remove the backgrounds, and our Photoshop training DVDs, 5 hours, covers how to do this. We can now add a background. We can add a black background. We can add the wording, and because it's on what's called a layer, these are called layers in Photoshop, I can move these things around. And so designs in Photoshop are built using what's called layers, and Photoshop lets you build images that are photorealistic. And so Photoshop is different than CorelDRAW. Now, if your customer wants his photograph on a shirt with great text effects, arch text, inline, outline text, which CorelDRAW and Illustrator do, you could take the photograph from Photoshop, you could use it to scan the Photoshop, take the photograph into CorelDRAW, add the various components to it, and then output separations that way. Photoshop is typically used for what's called real process, CMYK separations. It's typically used for simulated process, like the shirt that I'm wearing, where it's a black shirt. It's typically used for that, and the best way to do stuff like this and do separations is by our program called Fast Films. Fast Films does automatic color separations for shirts like this, including making an underbase, which is white ink for a dark shirt, pulling out the colors, adjusting for how the dots print on top of each other, and that's how people do high-end separations. That's a very quick overview of Adobe Photoshop.
Let's talk for a minute about the frames. There's a variety of frames that you can use in this industry, and depending on whether you're talking to a purist or somebody who's just out making money, you're going to get a variety of opinions about what type of frame you should use in your shop on a daily basis. There's a lot of people out there who use the standard wood frame. Now, in the old days, we used to do a cord and groove or stapled edge, but the wood frames of today have really changed a lot. They have a good tongue and groove corners, which make them very strong, and they're coated with a polyurethane coating to help keep them waterproof, because when we use water to rinse our images into these screens, the water could cause it to warp. Wood screens are fine to use. If you want to upgrade just a little bit from there, you could use an aluminum frame. Now again, they stretch the mesh and they glue it on using a super glue. And when either of these frames are done, when you've used them several times, maybe they've got a few holes in them, you can send these back to the shop, the factory, and they will sand it down, peel off the mesh, and put a whole new mesh on for you. But then there's the other option, which is a roller frame. And these are used in high-end shops, but don't be afraid of them. Newbies can use them too. And this uses rolling bars. As these roll, it helps make the mesh tighter. They're fairly easy to restretch and reuse. You wouldn't send these to a factory. But the purist will tell you that you have to use these, but there's really nothing wrong with using a wood frame. Now obviously there's some tension to the fabric on these screens, and that can be measured so that you can determine if you have a good screen or not. The tension is measured in newtons per centimeter, and we're going to use a tension meter here, which has a little plunger device here that will measure our tension in this way or this way based on how it's placed respectively. So if we look at this screen right here, we see that we're at 20 newtons and 20 newtons. And then you also want to move it around your screen to the different corners and make sure that you have a good even tension across. Anything lower than 10 and you probably want to throw it away. You want to keep your screens on average around 25 to 30 newtons. The purists that will tell you that you should be printing with 50 or 60 newtons are probably spending a lot of time restretching screens. It's more tensions than necessary in a day-to-day shop.
Let's talk about the actual mesh that goes on the frames. Kind of like the frames, there's difference of opinion. You can get your suppliers telling you one thing and purists telling you something else, and the industry is full of wives' tales about what mesh to use. But the mesh is basically a polyester mesh. It is sold by a number that is how many threads there are per inch, and per inch if you're in the US, per centimeters if you're in a foreign country. And so typically the lower the number, the coarser the mesh, meaning that if you're on like a 25 mesh, that's like screen door wire. If you're on a 350 mesh, it's like a silk scarf. Obviously, the lower the mesh number then means the more ink is going to go through the mesh. So when you're doing any kind of athletic printing or where it's a real thick, rubbery, heavy print, you'd be on a lower mesh count. When you're doing a softer print, a finer print with real fine halftone dots, you'd be on a higher mesh count. And so it's a matter of using the right mesh for the job. Typically in your shop, you're going to buy some frames, whether they be wood or retentionables. You're going to buy a little bit of different mesh sizes, and it's going to be a matter of determining what's the right mesh for the job. And again, sometimes you'll kind of maybe cheat. You might use the wrong mesh and figure you'll make it work at press. Let me give you really quickly some mesh recommendations. Now today the market likes glitter, likes prints that have a feel to them. That may change. By the time you buy this DVD it could be something else, but right now people like a print with a feel. Typically glitter, which is a big particle of mylar in clear ink, is going to be run through a 25 or a 30 mesh. That's about the only time you're ever going to use a mesh that coarse. For any kind of very thick athletic number where it's going to be a football number or a football jersey, you'd be on a 60 to an 186 mesh. For a lot of your everyday one-color prints, just your average knock 'em out, we tend to call it ink slapping sometimes, where it's just a simple one-color print on a light shirt. You're going to be on like a 125 to a 156 mesh. If you're going to be doing anything more detailed, where it's a little more detail, typically with halftone dots, a little finer print, a little softer feel for the print, you could be on a 180 to a 230 mesh. If you're going to do any kind of process printing, which I showed earlier, is CMYK, it's photorealistic, it's all tiny halftone dots, you'd be on a 305 to a 355 mesh for that. So you can see you do need a variety of meshes. If all you do is simple 1 and 2 color prints, you probably ought to buy some 125, buy some 156. Now your supplier may have 160, I may say 156. Mesh is made in Asia and it's made in Europe, and when they convert centimeters to inches, sometimes the numbers are similar but off a few threads. One guy might have 110, one supplier might have 109. It's no big deal, so don't worry about that. Now, if you notice when Mike talked about frames, mesh is in a color, usually it's in yellow, or it is in white. On low mesh counts, it doesn't matter, but on high mesh counts, you want to typically be with the amber or the colored mesh. The color in the mesh helps keep the light from bouncing through those white threads and bouncing around and exposing behind your design. And so if you want to do any kind of halftone dot work, detailed work, and you want to get less light scatter, you want to be on the yellow mesh for your screens. Okay, so far if we keep our focus, we took a piece of art, we scanned it in, we brought it up into CorelDRAW, we converted it into vectors, we added some color to it, we output the films, we made our frame selection. The job we're going to do today to show you is going to be either a one color or multicolor, because the black outline can work as a one color print, which means I said we could use anywhere from a 125 to 156 mesh. So we're going to use a 155 mesh, believe it or not, that's what these wood frames have on it. And again, that one thread difference is no big deal. We need to now coat the screen with what's called a photo emulsion. Now we have two types of stencils in this business. One is a photo emulsion, and one is commonly called direct film or capillary film. Capillary film is where a piece of clear acetate is coated with a light-sensitive liquid, and then it's stuck onto the screen, and then you dry it, peel off the clear carrier, expose the screen, wash the image out, go to press and print it. There are some in the industry who will say that's the way to go, and for short runs that's not a bad deal. But if you want to do any kind of halftone dot work where they're little small dots, do any kind of high mesh counts where the film doesn't want to stick to high meshes, you want to go with a liquid direct emulsion. You're often told by a supplier not to use direct emulsion because it's messy, or you even think it's messy, or you think it's too hard. And I'm here to tell you it's no big deal. I'm here to tell you that if you walk into any professional shop today, I guarantee you they're using a direct liquid emulsion and they're coating it onto the screens, and it's no big deal. Let's talk about that right now though. We have different kinds of emulsions, and I'm just going to kind of keep it short and talk to you about the most popular and the most successful kind. You want to use what's called a dual cure emulsion. Dual cure emulsions do come in two parts. Sometimes you'll think, well, that's not the way I want to go. Your supplier might say, oh, you want to buy the one-part emulsions. One-part emulsions are great, but they're really almost too good. Sometimes the exposure times for one-part emulsions are so fast that you have no latitude, meaning if you're a few seconds off when you expose your screen, you've either underexposed it or you've overexposed it. And so one-part emulsions being pre-mixed sound kind of sexy, but the world that does high-end, halftone dot work uses two-part emulsions. Once you mix the emulsions together, by the way, you've got about a 2 or 3 month shelf life, meaning if you're a small shop and you're making a few screens a week, you want to buy this stuff by the quart. You don't want to buy it by the gallon. If you're a large production shop, you're obviously going to buy it by the gallon or buy it by the 5 gallon. Now you've got to mix it. We're going to mix it right now, and hopefully you caught that I said that this is a photosensitive emulsion, and you're probably wondering, how can I mix it with these videotaping lights on? This emulsion is very, very weak in sensitivity when it's wet. And so here's how you mix it. You get two parts. One part is typically a small bag or a small bottle with a brown liquid in it called a sensitizer. You need to add warm water to the small bottle, and we'll see if we can do it without spilling it here. We're going to add warm water to it. We're then going to cap it, and no matter how tight you cap that thing, when you shake it up, it's going to leak, and this is going to turn into a very dark brown liquid that'll actually stain your fingers. We're going to shake it up. We're going to dissolve it. And again, if you're thinking, well, this is a lot of work and this is kind of messy, this is how the world does it. And so again, your supplier might say the one part's better, but the one part is, I'm telling you, it's too fast and it's very expensive. And just take the time to mix your sensitizer. We're now going to dump this into the quart of emulsion, and we're going to very carefully stir it up. Once we have sensitized the emulsion, again, it's got about a 2 to 3 month shelf life if you keep it cool. If it's summertime, you want to make sure and put the emulsion in the refrigerator when you're not using it. Don't leave it sit out at night in your hot shop. When this stuff gets over about 100 degrees, it starts to gel. You'll know the emulsion's gone bad when you go to pour it out of the container into your coating device, and it comes out like silly putty. And so you'll know it's gone bad. It needs to be, you know, like a pancake syrup or something that's runny like this. Now, you're going to need to take about 5 minutes to stir this up. Now, when it's all stirred uniformly, the problem you have is that from stirring it, you oftentimes stir bubbles into it, and the bubbles will be little voids when you coat your screens. Typically, the instructions that come with this stuff say to leave it sit for a couple of hours. And by the way, you'll notice that now we have sensitized emulsion and we have the unsensitized on the lid. Typically, I'll wash the lid off with the sink and dry it before I put it back in. Otherwise, we're going to have unsensitized mixing with the sensitized. But now it's sensitized, and if you watch it, you're going to see some air bubbles coming out. So again, the book says you need to stir it, leave it sit for a couple of hours. The term they use is to degasify it. And if you're in a hurry, though, the realities are you can coat screens right now. You know, a lot of times the job is due. You went to use the emulsion. It was a month old, and you went to pour it in the coater, and it was silly putty, and you need to mix a new batch, and the guy's going to be here in an hour. There's so many wives' tales in this business where people say, oh, you can't do something that way. And usually they should say you shouldn't do it, and here's the reason you shouldn't do it, but if you're in a pinch, you could do it. So we could actually coat a screen right now. Now, to coat your screens, you need a device called a scoop coater, sometimes called a coating trough, and they come in different widths, and you want to buy a coater that's going to be the right width for your screen. As an example, for this screen, I want a coater that's going to be smaller than my screen because I've got to coat the outside of the screen and the inside of the screen. You don't want to have a coater that really touches the edges. You want one that's going to be maybe an inch and a half on both sides smaller. And so you can buy a coater. This is a 14-inch. You can buy 16s. You can buy large coaters for billboard-sized screens, and they come in different styles. Some have a handle. This coater happens to have two edges to it. It has a rounded edge and it has a sharp edge. Now, some suppliers might say use the round edge. If you want to lay a lot of emulsion down, you might use the round edge. Most people, including myself, will say use the sharp edge. If you call me after you've made a few screens and say you've been trying to do half-tone dots and they just aren't washing out, my first question to you is going to be, what side of the coater did you use? And you're going to say the round side. And I'm going to say, who told you that? And you're going to say, my supplier told me that. And I'm going to say, you didn't watch the video that close because you should use the sharp edge of the coater. Also, coaters come with a rubber protective edge. Some have a cap on them, so it's pretty obvious the cap has to come off. But a lot of brands come with a rubber protective edge. This edge comes off. This is not there to use when you're coating your screen. It comes off. It's only there to keep the edge from getting dinged up. After a while, the edge of your coater may get a little nicks in it from just hitting it in the sink, hitting it against the counter, and it gets a little dinged up. And for the $15 or $20 cost of the coater, frankly, your best bet is eventually you throw it away and you buy a brand new coater. So we need a scoop coater, and we're going to use the sharp edge of the coater. We're going to try and carefully pour the emulsion into the coater. Well, there's a few bubbles in this because I just mixed this, and I typically would try and leave it sit for an hour or so. Now, if you can see some of the bubbles in it, that'll not be a real big deal, by the way. Now, you're going to have, again, lots of advice on how to coat screens. Everybody has an opinion in this industry, and they're all going to tell you their way. They're going to say coat it twice on the inside, 3 on the outside, rotate the screen 2 more times, 3 more times. Even the emulsion manufacturers give you, I think, at times, ludicrous directions for how to coat your screens. You want thin coats of emulsion. Now, using the sharp edge will be your first step to getting a thin coat. But basically, you're going to, first of all, degrease your screen. We're going to take the screen to the sink. We're going to put an industrial degreaser. Your supplier sells degreaser. You could use what's called Simple Green. You're going to get the screen wet, work up a lather, rinse the screen off, and dry it. If you don't degrease the screen before you coat it, you're going to have oils on it. Even just from touching it, you're going to get oils from your hands on it, and you want to take all this off. Now, certainly I'm breaking the rules right now, just kind of showing you what you don't want to do. So you always degrease your screen, and if you call me again and say you're doing screens, you have lots of little pinholes where the emulsion is not bridging properly, I'm going to ask you, did you degrease your screen? And you're going to say no, and I'm going to say, why didn't you degrease it? And you're going to say, your supplier said you didn't have to do it. And I'm just going to suggest you go back and degrease your screen and then dry it thoroughly. Now, The first screen you coat is going to be fun because you're going to not be sure how to hold the coater. You're going to be a little nervous with this thing. You're going to be a little uptight. And so the first screen may be a mess, no doubt about it. And we all have our favorite coating table that has lots of emulsion on it. But basically you're going to put the coater up against the bottom of the screen. You're going to tip it forward till the emulsion touches the screen. And we're going to pull it up. We're going to stop and very deliberately push in and scoop off the excess emulsion. Now, any extra drips or runs we don't care about. We can take them off later or we can leave them. We can take a little cardboard spreader and just clean those off. I want you to always coat the bottom of the screen first. That's the underside, the non-print side, the outside, depending on who you're talking to. We're going to coat the bottom first. Then we're going to come back and put the coater on the inside of the screen. Again, tip it forward so the emulsion rolls forward and touches the mesh. Bring it up, not too fast. Tip it back, let the emulsion roll into the coater, and break it off. We're going to coat the outside and the inside, and we're done. And again, I said a second ago that some suppliers might say coat outside twice, inside 3 times. Now, if you're on a low mesh count, you may come back and give the outside one more coat. You may give the inside one more coat. On a low mesh count, the thread's pretty thick and you want to build the emulsion up. If you're doing very fine work on high mesh counts like process work where it's little tiny halftone dots, you leave it at that. You typically would never only coat once. You want to pretty much coat out and in to try and trap the fabric and put the emulsion on both sides. Now, when you dry the screen, you want to dry it in a dark room. We have the video lights on here and this emulsion is wet. It's not very sensitive when it's wet. When this dries, I wouldn't be standing here with this screen. But we could be here with regular room lights when this emulsion is dry. But right now we've got to dry the screen. Typically you want to dry it bottom side down, non-print side down, so the emulsion will sag to the bottom of the screen. I want the emulsion really thicker down here. This is where the film's going to touch it. This is where the stencil's going to be. I want it to be a little thicker here. Now, it's not to say you couldn't put the screen in front of, against the wall and put a fan on it and let it dry. Now, the purists would say, oh my gosh, you can't do that. But there are shops that do it all day long. If it's a one-color, non-critical design, it's not a big deal. But you might want to think about where you're going to dry your screens. If you're in a small house, you might want to pick a closet. You could leave them in the bathroom and close the door to dry them. Once they're dry, you could then put them in a cardboard box to just kind of store them, because once they're dry, the emulsion is going to be good for maybe a month before you have to expose the screen. You could actually coat up a bunch of screens, dry them, stick them in a box, stick them in a closet, and just keep them there as you need. So you might coat up some 155s, some 180s, some 200s, some 125s, and have your variety of screens out there. So, if we could summarize, you're going to buy a dual cure emulsion. You're going to mix it using warm water. You're going to stir it up. You're going to leave it sit for maybe an hour if you can. You're going to buy a scoop coater. You're going to use the sharp edge of the coater. You're going to coat a 1-on-1. That's what we would call it. So when somebody says I coated a 2-on-1, they coated twice on the bottom, once on the inside. And again, everybody has their favorite way of coating. You might find it in your shop. You like coating twice with one inside coat, and life is good. That's how we coat screens.
All right, we've coated our screens with emulsion, and now we need to burn the image into our screens using an exposure unit. An exposure unit consists of some type of a high UV light source. This one has a 1000-watt metal halide bulb down in the bottom, and it's going to beam light up through our film positive that we created in the computer. You're going to place this on the glass here, then you're going to take your screen and line it up over the top so that it's all very square. Then you'll bring the lid down, and this we use a vacuum to sandwich it all together very tightly. So we want good contact between the film positive and the screen. This is called a point light source unit, a very quality unit. As we go down the ladder, we have a fluorescent tube unit. Now this uses an unfiltered black light, and it has an array of bulbs here that will give us even light throughout our screen. Again, you're going to put your film down, place your screen on it, and bring it down, and vacuum once again will hold it all together. Now, if you're on a tight budget, we can use the sun to expose. We're going to make a sunlight exposure unit using a piece of board, a piece of foam covered with a black cloth, and then you'll place your screen onto your foam. You'll put your film positive onto your screen and your glass, sandwiching it all together. Now you go out into the sun, expose it to the sun for about 30 seconds, and then you'll bring it back in where we'll wash it out. Now maybe you need to expose at night. You can use, say, a photo flood bulb or a backyard light, and you'll hang it at approximately the diagonal distance of a screen and expose that way. Now this unit will take about 40 minutes. The fluorescent tube unit will probably take about 5, and this unit here will take about 45 light units. It doesn't actually use time in its measure. Let's go ahead and expose a design. Now we're going to expose it on the Nuark, and the first thing you want to do whenever you're going to expose is clean your glass. Little flecks of dirt and any other obstacles that you have on your glass are going to cause pinholes in your screen, which will allow ink to come through in places that we don't want it to come through at, leaving little dots of ink on the screen. So you want to wash your glass really good. Now you notice that when we coated the screens, we just did them in normal room light. No sunlight, no windows or anything like that. We're in an enclosed room here. Normally we would subdue the lights for this portion, but for the purpose of the video, I'm going to leave them full on. You don't have to be doing this in a completely pitch black room. Fluorescent lights at this distance would take a couple hours to expose our screen. So we keep our screens in an enclosed closet, nice and light tight. Now, what we need to do is we need to secure our film positive onto the screen. There's two sides. The side that has the printing on it from your inkjet, that is the side that you want to put facing the screen. In the old days, that was called emulsion to emulsion contact. Now you want to take some tape and secure your film to the screen in 2 places, corner to corner. And you're going to turn your screen over, bring down the lid, lock it down. I believe for this one, we are using 23 light units, and you hit start. Now as it vacuums down, it's really pressing it all together. If the film doesn't have good contact with the screen, then it can cause the light to get around our image and it'll mess up the screen when we go to wash it out. Now, providing everything worked well, we'll be able to wash this out at our sink. You want to take it, you're going to remove your film positive. Now a lot of times water can cause these to run or ruin them or stick them together, so you want to keep this maybe at your exposure area away from the sink. Alright, we're going to wash this out using cool water. You don't want to use hot water for this process, and you don't want to use a pressure washer either. You want to coat both sides of the screen with some water, just to kind of get it wet. Now you immediately can see the image starting to appear. You'll know that if nothing washes out, that you're overexposed, and if everything washes out, that you're underexposed. You can touch it and feel it, especially on the inside. And if you're underexposed, it'll feel very slimy and might leave a little residue on your finger as well. Now you can see in these areas where it's starting to open up. Now at this point we would take it and we would blot it with newsprint or paper towels. You just want to blot the excess water away, because the areas that appear exposed might be a little bit underexposed, and that can cause what's called scumming, where the water at this point will seep back into your image, and if you were to just let it dry like this, it would develop a thin film that you might not be able to see closing your image off. So you really want to make sure and blot it away. They also make vacuum attachments where you can vacuum the excess water away. This is a pretty effective way, the vacuum method. All right, now it's no longer light sensitive. At this point, you can either put it in a drying cabinet or you could put it outside in the sun to dry. Putting it outside in the sun will also finish off any remaining emulsion that didn't fully expose.
Now Mike showed you exposing the one color print and washing it out. And one of the questions you're going to have always is what's your exposure time is going to be. Mike talked about 40 minutes, 5 minutes, 25 to 45 light units. You really won't know because your exposing unit, your brand of emulsion, how you coat your screens is all different. So you might be exposing maybe as a test for 10 minutes and find out that really it should be 2 minutes. All of the emulsion companies make a product called an exposure calculator, and this will get you a little closer. Now, it still requires you to have an idea of where you need to be, and the realities are if you go to the sink and wash it out and it all washes away, you know you're grossly underexposed, meaning if you were only exposed for a minute, maybe you should be going 5 minutes. But with this guy, you put this on a screen, you expose for twice the time you think you should expose for, so you have to have a rough starting idea, and when you wash it out, it gives you various exposure times. It actually gives you 5 different exposure times with one exposure. And there's complete directions. We're not going to cover in depth how to use this here because it does come with complete directions. These are about $40 from the emulsion manufacturers, and it's really a must-have tool because you're going to spend a lot of time exposing screens. In the beginning, you may have to burn your first few screens and determine the right time, so it may mean going through and burning a few screens just to get the right time. The other thing is you want to get your design in the right location on the screen. This is the print side of the screen, the inside of the screen. This is the bottom of the screen. You want the image to be right reading, meaning it's looking correct and reading correct when you're looking down through the screen, and you want to have the image in the right location. So when you print the image is straight to the frame. There's enough area in the bottom of the screen for the ink to sit. Now for a one-color print, the placement of the image on the screen isn't that critical. Just get it on the screen, get it straight, and get it in the center. For multicolor prints, you want to have all of the screens have all of the images in the same location from screen to screen. Your printing press only has so much adjustment, and when you're trying to line the job up and trying to adjust it, if the black image on the screen is really low and the next screen has the yellow image really high, you can't adjust the screens to be in register. Let me talk to you then for a second about how we do what's called screen pre-registration. Now, Mike showed taping the film to the bottom of the screen. That's one way to do it when you're doing simple one-color designs or even multicolor designs where you can measure where the films are going to go. I've gone ahead and taped down the black outline called the keyline film on the exposing unit. I've taped it in place. I've made sure it's in the right location where I want it to be. I've got a little guide on my exposing unit, and I've got it taped in place. Now I would expose my first screen just like Mike showed you. So we're going to expose the first screen, we're going to take it to the sink and wash it out, we're going to dry it. We're then going to come back and we're going to take one of our other films. Now the film has a little target on it called registration targets. This is actually a little guy right here that comes out of Corel or Photoshop. They actually create this, and this is on all the films and it's in all 4 corners. So if we line the films up, the targets line up, and if the targets line up, the design's in registration. We're going to line this target up, and we're going to tape the second film in place, remove the first film. Hopefully this is all making sense. We're now going to grab our next screen. And we're going to expose this screen by placing our screen against our stops here on our marks. Now hopefully it's making sense that when I expose this screen, this image is in the same location on this screen as the other image was on that screen, because I've got the films in the same spot on the glass, the screen's in the same spot, and we're going to expose this screen.
Now once you've exposed your screens and you've dried them, we need to prepare them to go on the press. You have to take care of things like pinholes, which is where a small opening has happened in the screen and ink is coming through, making dots of ink outside of our image area. You can take care of those with a little piece of masking tape, where you're just going to find the pinhole, typically by looking up into a light or leaning down if it's on the press, and you're just going to put some tape on it. Now there's a variety of ways of doing it depending on how many shirts you're going to print. This would be a solution if you're just printing a couple of hundred shirts. But if you have a very long haul, a long run, you want to take a substance called Blockout, and we're going to use the tip of a pen or a pencil, and you're just going to dot that on where there's pinholes. Allow this to dry. This is kind of like a lacquer. You could also use fingernail polish in a pinch. Now, once you have your screen pinholed, we have this area around the edge where ink is just going to fall through it. So what you want to do is you can either take packing tape, which is a standard blue tape, and you would tape it right along and successively layer it up until about an inch away from your image. Or if you're doing a much longer haul for your screen, you're actually going to use a liquid blockout. And you pour a pool of it on, and then you take your cardboard scraper and you're just going to fill in that area. Again, keeping it away, about an inch away from your image area. Now this would be set to dry, and when it dries, this would be ready to go on the press. Now when you're taping a screen, that's good for a wood screen. But when you're taping a metal frame, you typically want to tape on the bottom of a screen so that the tape doesn't come off into your ink. On a roller frame, on a metal frame, we have this recession right here, which is really bad for trapping ink. And so they have a special tape for these screens where it has these blue squares on it. Now these blue squares there's almost no adhesive here, and this allows you a place where you can kind of grab it and peel it off. And you're just going to take that and work it all the way around the inside of your frame. And there you go. This has caused a nice barrier so that when we go to reclaim this screen and clean the ink out to reuse the screen, that'll be a pretty easy chore to do.
Let's talk about the ink you're going to use. The main ink in this business is called Plastisol. Plastisol is a PVC-based ink, and we use the word ink loosely because Plastisol is really an industrial coating. It's very durable. It holds up to regular laundering, but it doesn't hold up to dry cleaning. Now, Plastisol is used on 99.9% of the shirts you see out there. So no matter what you're told or what you think, or maybe you have a hobbyist kit on how to print a few shirts for friends, or maybe it's a water-based ink, Plastisol is the ink that's being used. The beauty of Plastisol is that it has to be heat cured, beauty meaning it'll never dry on the screen. Typically any kind of vinyl ink or ink you'd use on posters or signs or any kind of a water-based ink, if you don't keep printing, that ink is going to dry up on you. Plastisol will never dry. In fact, this ink can be left open in the screen with the lid off the ink container if you want for years. Until this ink reaches 320 degrees Fahrenheit, this ink stays as a liquid. Once it reaches 320 degrees Fahrenheit, it turns into more of a solid. So it's called Plastisol. It is not going to be available from your art store or from a hardware store or a paint store. It's going to be available from a screen print supply company in your area. Look in your phone book. You're going to see in the phone book Screen Printing Supplies. Or check one of the trade magazines we talked about, Impressions, Printware. You're going to see various suppliers. Or go to screenprinters.net. You're going to see various suppliers. They're going to carry Plastisol. Now there's various types of plastisol, and keep in mind that in this short DVD we can only cover these topics somewhat quickly. We have an hour-and-a-half video on how to use your inks properly, but I'm going to give you the high points right now so you can leave this section and make a print. Plastisol comes in various varieties. The one you're going to use for most of your everyday printing is called a general purpose plastisol, commonly called a GP plastisol. This is designed for light shirts mainly, or as the top color for dark shirts where you're printing on top of a base of white plastisol. This is a regular plastisol here. This is a GP. Now typically it's a little thick, hard to explain, maybe like a mayonnaise, you know, like a creamy butter, something like that. The second kind of plastisol is called a high opacity. We're going to cover that a little bit later when we talk about doing work on dark shirts. They're called typically high opacity or HO inks, and they're a little thicker. They have more filler. They're designed to cover dark shirts and try and mask the shirt color from coming through. So when you see a white print on a black shirt, that's a high opacity plastisol. The third type is typically called an athletic plastisol. If you do any work on athletic jerseys, uniforms, anything that takes industrial laundering and also requires to take a lot of abrasion, you want to get a stringy or a tougher ink, and it's typically called an athletic ink. Now every manufacturer has their own names, their own item numbers, their own thinking on it, but typically if you call and say I want to buy XYZ brand and I want your general purpose, they'll know what you're talking about. Not every manufacturer has an athletic ink, but athletic ink is the way to go if you're doing a lot of real, not spectator shirts where it's a spectator shirt with a number on it, but I mean the actual uniform someone's going to be wearing rolling around in the grass. Then you want to use a regular athletic plastisol. The fourth type of plastisol is called a process plastisol. This is a very specific plastisol designed for CMYK on light shirts. Very transparent ink, very creamy, very runny. This is not an ink you're going to use for your everyday, we'll call it ink slapping, or everyday ink slapping, meaning logos, 1 and 2 color designs, even multicolor designs on light shirts will be your general purpose ink. Now, a couple key points. First of all, this ink has to be cured, so you know by now from our introduction you have to have a dryer or a heater of some sort. If you're a startup and you're on a limited budget, you can buy a flash cure unit, and that's all you need because that will actually cure the print. Some suppliers might tell you that only gives you a partial cure, and they'll say that it cannot be used as a dryer. That's a lie. There are thousands and thousands of printers using only a heater on a stand to cure their prints. Eventually you will move up to a conveyor dryer for increased production and more efficiency and more control. This ink must reach, I said 320 degrees Fahrenheit. That's going to be the right point. It actually starts to get a little bit cured somewhat about 250 degrees, but we're going to be about 320 or higher. The question always is, can you overcure this ink? And the joke is that if you overcure the ink, the shirt's on fire. So we really don't care about that. Overcuring is not the issue. Undercuring is the issue. You have to have ways to measure the cure temperature at your dryer. And one of the more popular methods is to buy an inexpensive infrared ray gun that you actually point at the garment as it leaves the tunnel or as you move the flash heater away, and you read the surface temperature of the ink. And this is a very popular way of checking your cure. Of course, we like to also joke that you'll know when the inks don't cure because you will probably wear your misprints. You'll wear the ones that weren't quite right. You'll wash those shirts, and if the ink washes off the shirt, you know that you didn't get a very good cure. So occasionally you'll wash a shirt and yours will wash off, and you'll wonder what happened to the customer's print. So curing is very important. As we've mentioned numerous times, the How to Print T-shirt book has a good section on this. We have videotape, of course, on inks that covers it in more detail. Now, one of the more important points of using plastisol ink is to think about and understand the additives for inks and be very aware that your supplier may not always have good advice for you. Typically, your screen print supply companies mean well, but oftentimes they're selling vinyl, they're selling digital output media, they're selling paints, they're selling screening supplies for non-textiles. You have salesmen who really maybe know the entire line and know the prices, but have never used the product. We often find in our classes we have students who come from suppliers who are in the class to learn the process, and we coat screens, and they say they've been selling this stuff for years. They've never coated a screen. And it's the same thing with ink. Be very careful because bad advice from a supplier means possibly ruined shirts. And typically ink companies have the same approach that Kodak has. When your film comes back ruined from your vacation, they do not pay you to go back on your vacation. They pay you for a new roll of film. And so be very aware of that. The main additive you need is called a reducer. And you want to get specifically a curable or a balanced reducer. This is actually plastisol ink that's very thin and almost very liquidy. And you can use it to reduce your ink. Now I just reduced this ink a little bit. I'm going to stir it up. This is actually very, very thin plastisol. This actually would cure, And if you stir it up, your ink can be a little soupier. You want to get your ink to be a little runnier, a little smoother when you're printing. If it's so thick that you can barely stir it, it's too thick. You want to thin it down. Now, many suppliers will say, don't thin your ink. Don't add anything to it. The ink company knows what they're doing. That's not true. The ink company doesn't know whether you're on a light shirt, a medium color shirt, a dark shirt. They don't know if you want the print to be soft or heavy. It's your job to learn about reducing your inks and using your inks correctly. Ink companies do provide a technical data sheet to go with the product to tell exactly how to reduce it, what kind of additives work with it. Your supplier might suggest not using a reducer and might suggest adding what's called a base to your ink. A base to the ink is actually thick ink that has no pigment. We want to reduce the ink down and make it thinner. So you do want to get a reducer, not a base or an extender, to make your ink more creamy and smoother. And you'll see when we're at press what we mean by this. Now, there's lots of other inks out there. There's inks that glow. There's inks that have a puff feel to them. There's inks that have a leathery feel. This is called suede, and there's lots of inks out there like that. You can also put foil on your inks. We are not covering that in this video, but if you talk to your ink company, they have, again, a complete catalog. They have all the products, and they have the technical data sheets that tell you how to use all the special effects inks.